So, I can't say that my husband and I are high school sweethearts, but it's only for the fact that it was only he that was in high school while I was in college when we first started dating. We were married at 19 and 21, and looking back, we were such babies. We were so young, but against the odds, here we are, still together 15 years later. We had a good foundation. We had the obligatory premarital counseling. We have great examples in both sets of our parents who are still together, and we were committed. And since then, it's been pretty easy. One of our biggest fights early on was over how to make chili. Should we make it like his mom, or should we make it like my mom, which was obviously the right way? But marriage is apparently about compromise, so now we make chili like neither of our mothers, but I am very proud to say that we took home third place in our neighborhood chili cook-off last year. He's this really laid-back but efficient person, and he's always pushing me out of my comfort zone. We bought our first house together, we went overseas multiple times, and we hosted international students in our home, which were all things that I was not necessarily ready for, but have all been really wonderful and enriching experiences. So like I said, it was pretty easy. Sometimes I wondered if it was too easy until, when he went crazy those 2 times. We joke and call it crazy, but really they were manic episodes of bipolar 1 disorder, which included psychosis. The first time it happened was back in 2012, and he had this incredible amount of stress coming off of his job, and this lasted for months. He was losing weight, he was only getting about 4 hours of sleep a night, and then things kind of turned and he got paranoid that people were going to hack into his computer. It all culminated one evening when, after I got home, he was really anxious, and we had to close all of the blinds to our house because he was convinced that the FBI was outside spying on us. He was really agitated, he was talking really fast. I couldn't even really hold a conversation with him. I knew he needed sleep, and so I gave him some Advil PM, and we sat down on the couch to watch some TV. Usually that knocks him out in an instant. But the next thing I know is I'm woken up at 1 a.m. and he's babbling to no one, nothing that I can even comprehend, so I decided it's time to take him to the hospital. On the way there, I turn on the radio, and he starts having a conversation with the radio, like it's talking directly to him. We get to the hospital, and we check in. The first thing that they do is they test him for drugs, and they're surprised when the results come back clean. I have a conversation with the doctor, and while it's not completely unhelpful, neither did it provide any answers as to what was going on. I was at a loss. I was a little numb at this point, and the only thing that I could figure is doctors are supposed to help, right? So I sit down with my husband, we have a conversation, and he checks himself into a psych ward. And that was awful. He thought he was in jail. He was trying to convince me to call a lawyer to get him released. Everything that he read had this double meaning that he was trying to decipher, and the TVs were talking directly to him. The psychiatrist has a very short appointment with my husband, diagnoses him as bipolar, and loads him up on medication. And this is just a whole other level of awful. His eyes won't focus, he can't read, and he's basically high off of the dosages that he's on. And at this point, the question that just is running through my head constantly is he going to be okay? Will he ever regain his sense of reality? And that's what haunted me for the week that he was in the hospital. But spoiler, he got better. He was released from the hospital, and then we had 7 years of normalcy. He worked with his doctors, got off his medication, and things went back to how they were. So fast forward to last spring, and while the second episode was really no less traumatic, It started out really great. The thing about ramping up into mania is that before it kind of goes off the deep end, a bipolar person's brain is working harder and faster, and it can be this wonderful, enlightened time where they just feel fantastic. It started out, he left me little love notes out of the blue, which doesn't happen every day. And then he surprised me at work, and we just had one of our top 5 date nights. It was nothing really special, but he was just so charismatic that evening. He was just a delight to be around. He was attentive and really chatty. It was just wonderful. The next morning, I realized that some things just weren't quite right, and I was certainly traumatized from the first experience, and he was too. So I sat him down and through sobs told him that I thought he was having another manic episode, and he completely rejected that anything was wrong, and then turned things around on me and told me that he thought I worried too much, and that later changed into a delusion that we were toxic for each other. It ended up that he kicked me out of the house for a night, and while this time I knew what was going on, I had this intense nervous anxiety because I knew he needed help, and help pretty soon, but he was not going to have it. For whatever reason, the next morning, his delusion shifted for a little bit, and I was no longer a threat. He had gone into work, and I asked if I could come see him. He agreed to that, so I went in. I knew I needed to get him out of there. And so I enlisted the help of his coworkers and his boss, but the thing that I didn't tell you is that the previous couple of days he was telling them how unstable I was, how we were really bad for each other, and how I was really trying to be this controlling person. So now here I am basically demanding that they send him home to me, his crazy controlling wife. I did end up getting him home, and later that day his mind got so tightly wound that he suggested going to the hospital himself. And this time was different because I was the target of his delusions. I wasn't allowed to know anything about what was going on. He wouldn't give them permission. So I didn't know if he was taking medication. I didn't know if he was doing better or doing worse. I had no idea, and it was this intensely frustrating moment of knowing in my brain that yes, they have to protect the patient first, but everything else in me pushed against that fact. He did, again, regain stability, came home, and then pretty soon after dropped down into a terrible depression. And I don't know personally what that's like, but it was gut-wrenching to see him struggle. He's this really, really extroverted, charismatic person, and he was just none of those things in his depression. We talked to a psychiatrist once we really realized kind of what was going on. We got him on medication, and he did get out of it about 3 weeks later. That was the longest 3 weeks of my life, coming home every day just hoping he'd have one small positive thing to say, and then also worrying that what if this medication doesn't work? What if we have to go back to square one and wait another 3 weeks? What if it's longer than this? But it did work. And I think in many ways we had the best case scenario. His medications worked for him with very few side effects. He stayed on the medication, which is really important for bipolar people. We have this incredible support system, and he made it easy on me. He never shied away from what really happened, which enabled me to get the emotional support that I needed. It's only been about a year since his last hospital stay. So we're trying to still figure out what this new normal looks like. I'm hypersensitive to him making any change into mania or depression. He's too blasé, in my opinion, about many things. But in the end, I like to think that in many ways we're back to where we started. He just convinced me that we needed a new investment property to run as an Airbnb. We ate our fill of chili last winter, and now we're just a little bit wiser about what in sickness and in health can really mean. Thank you.